Hello, everyone. Welcome to our special online forum and meeting of the minds today. My name is Sarah Bryant. I'm the Senior VP of Corporate Development and the Education Director at DBA Platform, where it's our mission to get you found. And you already know that DBA is the premier software and solution provider for managing local presence at scale and winning visibility for your locations on Google, Bing, Apple, and other platforms that consumers are using in their buyer journey today. So what we're going to be doing here, the agenda is what's hot now and how to make the most of it in local SEO. Things are changing. You may have noticed that we've had 3 webinars this month because so many new things are coming out that are, interesting and sort of need to know. So joining us today, we have a panel of experts in local SEO who also make up DBA's advisory board. They're going to share with us the insights on best practices for local SEO, whether you are an expert or you're a beginner. They've got something for you, and they're here to tackle your specific questions on how to get found online. And the questions is one of the favorite parts of our webinar series, where we're going to actually collect your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll give our experts an opportunity to apply all of the knowledge that they have in their specific areas to your inquiries, and we'll get to the bottom of some of the biggest problems that plague you. So let me introduce our education team for today. We have Kevin Pauls, who is the owner and operator of Simple SEO. Kevin serves local businesses and supports marketing agencies with process development and SEO consulting. We have Stefan Sombruck, who is the founder at Marketing Metrology. He's also a Google product expert, and he believes the largest difficulty facing marketers is figuring out how to quantify our results in our marketing activities, something that is only getting more difficult with more crowded stuff in our online world. We have Rachel Ford Hutman, who is the CEO and founder of Ford Hutman Media, which is a boutique communications firm that provides media relations, thought leadership, and executive visibility to life sciences companies. And then we have Sherry Benelli, who is the founder of Early Bird Digital Marketing. She has over 22 years of experience in SEO and digital marketing. Sherry is a Google Platinum product expert, and she's contributed, you've probably seen her in some prominent digital marketing blogs like Search Engine Land, Moz, SEMrush, Bright Local, and others. She contributes lots of knowledge in this space. And then we have our own homegrown Jan Gilbert. He's one of the regulars on our webinar series because he's a master in local SEO, and he's the creator of Local Falcon, the original Google Maps grid tracking system that people use to basically analyze their local SEO. And he's part of that very exclusive Google Platinum product expert team as well. And again, I'm Sarah Bryant, your session concierge and fellow knowledge seeker in the quest to understand how to leverage the digital world and bring more consumers to all of our digital properties. So, Jan, did you want to start with like what's new in the Google world, or?
Yeah, super. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I always start with what's new, the categories, because Google's constantly updating, and we want to get the first dibs on things before our competitors. So we have some new categories for this month. Some just added last week, actually. So we have farrier service, cannabis club, state parliament, rehearsal studio, and musician and composer. So you can see some of them are more useful than others. Not too many people will be using state parliament, or farrier service. I don't know how many people work on horses nowadays, but they're there. And it's always odd to know, like, why are they adding certain categories and not others? Because you would think some are very more popular than others, but that's what they choose. I guess it's a global thing. So they figure out what people are searching for globally, and they add them that way. Last month, there was orthopedic supply store, financial advisor, which is kind of important. It used to be financial. There was another one that was a financial similar one, but they added this one, and then hostile thing. So if any of these make sense for your business, make sure you add them either as a new primary or secondary category, because that really makes a huge difference in rankings if they make sense for you. Then I go into the bugs, and there's not too many bugs going on now. Last month there was a crazy amount, but they seem to have fixed those. Sherry just mentioned to me that there was some people unable to delete posts. There's not too many, and I don't know if it only happens like if you're indirectly in the dashboard or if it's through the API, but there's a current bug where if you make a mistake and you got to try to edit or delete and it's not working properly, and so that might be an issue for you right now. There are a lot of verification issues going on where people are having trouble getting verified, and similarly, sometimes it works with sometimes you get verified and then you get suspended right away, and then the suspension queue is either very long or they just outright deny you. You send in all your paperwork and you send in everything, a picture of a storefront even, and they'll say, nope, too bad. We don't even acknowledge you exist. And so they're trying to work through that. And that might still be a few weeks. And there's some businesses that are really, really getting hurt. So if you're stuck waiting for suspension or reinstatement, I should say, you're not alone. It's a larger issue that's going on behind the scenes there. And what's new? So we're going to talk about these things, and there's some new maps navigational features. Not a big thing. I don't have any screenshots, but basically they've added some more interactivity and street view interactions and things like that. So you might see some cool features like going on. It doesn't really help SEO. You can also now manage a little bit better through the Maps app some of your business profile settings. It was a little bit limited before, and they've added those additions. So if you're not using desktop, you're using your phone, you can do a little bit more. And of course, the biggest thing that's coming is the SGE, another acronym that we have to all learn now, Search Generative Experience, where Google is using the AI to pull in information, and it's affecting local. And I have some screenshots here. And so you can see on the left is our normal 3-pack, and this is kind of like pest control in Buffalo was just a general search in our 3-pack. And then on the right-hand side is the SGE, and we're getting a 5-pack and some other businesses in the top right there. And also the map, I don't have the map on the 3-pack, but the map is different because now you have more businesses and it's zoomed out. But this changes depending on the query. So not everyone has access to this, but I'm assuming everyone will eventually get access to this. So this is the biggest thing. So I'll open it up now to a discussion and see what other people are saying.
First, can I just weigh in on that acronym and say SGE is like a typical Google acronym? They're almost harder to say than the words spelled out usually.
Well, that one is search generated. Like that one has a lot of synonyms in there, so it's hard to say. But yeah, let me. I'm gonna stop sharing so we can all see each other a little bit better here. And why don't we keep going? What's going on with the SGE? Does anyone here have access and is testing it out?
Yeah, I'm testing it out. I've been testing it out for a few weeks now. They're getting better with local searches. They weren't very good with local searches right out the gate, so they're getting much better with showing local results, I think, over the past couple of weeks. Are you finding that too as well?
Well, I mean, it's pulling in 5, so it's kind of like, well, now you have more choice. And I guess the biggest question that people are going to ask is like, well, is there something that we have to do or can do to optimize for that? And as far as I'm concerned, it's a bit early. I think they're still going to be doing a lot of changes, and I don't foresee a way to be able to optimize differently. But we never know. I mean, that's our job, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, kind of the scary part is like the local finder isn't available on SGE that I've been able to find. Have you found any such way to get into see more of those results?
Oh, you mean the see more button is not? Yeah, so they're just giving you 5 and then pick from these. Yeah, go ahead, Stefan. I see you're unmuting and muting. So.
No, I'm just clicking just to make sure my mouse hasn't fallen asleep. I would say I actually haven't had a chance to play with it yet, and I don't know if it's because I'm in Canada or if I just haven't clicked the right thing, but I haven't seen it in person. As far as the changes between shifting from a 3-pack to a 5-pack, from what I've read, there's quite a bit of overlap, so it's a little bit different, but a lot of similarity as well, which brings me a little bit of comfort to know that maybe they haven't radically changed the way they're choosing who goes into that 5-pack.
Yeah, I don't know what other factors could be Like, I mean, besides maybe some weight ranking that they would adjust, but I don't know what new things that they can add that would drastically change. I mean, it would be a proximity, it would be relevant, it would be the same three core thing that they're going to be looking at. I don't know what else, like what would make it different, and why is it different? Why sometimes in the example I had before, why is 1, 2, 3 different than the other 1, 2, like 1, 2, 3? So that is takes a lot of time, and for me at least, when things are in flux, it's not worth spending hours and hours analyzing, because the next week it might change, and then everything you just did goes out the window. So we've got to wait till it settles a little bit more to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I guess, like I said, my big concern is right now it's just showing X number of results, but all those other businesses with Google business profiles just aren't accessible. And I guess that's my big concern right now when it comes to local and SGE.
But do you think people actually click them, see more places, like, or do they just pick from the top ones they're shown anyway?
No, I mean, I think people click on more places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. What does everybody else think?
Well, I do when I'm searching for a business, but that doesn't reflect on, you know, how the average user or how users on average use the search results. So I wouldn't want to use my behavior as a reflection of the comments.
I mean, they base everything on data. So I would think that if they take that away, they're basically seeing within their system saying, well, even if people do hit more, they pick the next 2 out of the first 5. So they're like, why even bother showing 6 through 20? Because there's such a small percentage are picking them. Why give them too much choice, right? So here's the top 5, because 95% of the people pick within the top 5 anyway. So that's why they might be taking that button.
Maybe.
Away.
Yeah, maybe.
I think that's a really important point to consider. The fact that everything Google does is driven by data. It goes back to what you said earlier, Jan, about new categories. New categories come from what people are searching for, not because somebody asked politely, right? They really are driven by data, and that 5-pack is probably a reflection of that.
Yep, asking politely doesn't help you.
We do have a question around tips on finding out what your target audience is searching for. So what kind of research do you guys do that determines like what you're going to put prominently in your profiles for local SEO? Like, how do you figure out what you want to say first, second, third? I know, Ian, you talk a lot about like picking your categories properly. And so I think that's probably what that question is about.
Hey, go ahead. I'll let other people go because I'm here every month. So
the actual question is, what are some tips on finding out what your target audience is searching for? And what are some of the best practices for including that in your local profile? And then, okay, a follow-up to that that's come in is, how important are things such as service descriptions, categories, attributes? What's most important?
Well, I can speak to making sure that you put it into the content that you're developing, and I'm guessing someone else can probably speak to how you do that research in regards to what the best categories and SEO terms are. But once that research is done, then it is really helpful when you're putting it into your content, you know, whether it be your website, social media profiles, to make sure that you're working that in. And then also working in those terms in different ways, right? So you don't want to just sound like a robot and just keep putting in all of those same terms. Also, too, that doesn't make something very engaging for someone to actually read. So you want to be using those terms in similar ways to make the content interesting, while also making sure, though, that you are using those correct terms and categories so SEO is reading it correctly. But can someone else maybe speak to how to make sure you're getting those correct terms? Because they're kind of giving to us as communicators, and then I just go off with someone like Sarah and we put it in really pretty into our content.
Exactly. And I would think, well, one thing that I've noticed that you guys can speak to much more technically than I can is that there was a time when you had to figure that out. I don't know that you really have to figure that out so much anymore, because Google, you know, the search engines are figuring out that stuff. They're matching, they're looking at things like now, I forget, somebody internal to DBA said, they're looking at, Google looks at, 500 behavioral markers per month per person to see what they're doing. And, so like, I think, and it probably depends on the industry that you're in. It's clear cut for maybe, a hair salon, the kinds of things that people are looking for, and less clear cut for something that, has more services or seasonal services, or, could become more complex. But I mean, don't you think the search engines are kind of figuring this out for us now?
Well, I mean, there's different tools that you can use, to look for keywords. But to me, keywords are less important than topics nowadays. So, I mean, when you're writing content, you want to look at topics more so than individual keywords.
Like, what do you mean, for instance?
So, you want to think about what topics are your customers interested in learning about in general, and you want to write about those topics instead of thinking about like individual keywords and how do I work those keywords into a blog post or a piece of content, for instance. But when it comes to Google Business Profiles, there's very few sections within a Google Business Profile where you can put a keyword and it's really going to make a difference. So like your description, there's no SEO benefit to putting keywords in your description. It's not a ranking factor. Now, services, you want to try and pick services that Google, if they have predefined services that pop up, go ahead and select those if they match services that you offer. You can also create your own services. But if Google has services that they say, if you are a landscaper and, retaining walls is a service that is offered by Google, go ahead and select that one. So if Google has services that are predefined for you to select, go ahead and select those if they match what you offer, because that can impact rankings. And you can also create your own. But there's very few things within the Google Business Profile that you can really impact rankings with keywords.
When it comes to content, though, even for your site, like what tools would you use to, if as a marketer, if you're working, in a particular industry with a client, where would you go to find out, what topics their clients might be wanting to hear?
Yeah. So I use SEMrush, and then I also use SE Ranking. Those are the two tools that I use.
I mean, I've always found the best way is to actually go to the source. So often when you're doing the research, doing everything online using tools and stuff doesn't give you the real experience that people have. So if you can somehow pull your customers to pull their customers and find out how people actually search, what they typed in to get there, that's really helpful. So certain terminology, even topical or topic to topic, sometimes it changes based on the location. So people search things differently in one location. And so you might want to optimize that differently than from location A to location B. The other place that I find helpful is the Search Console, or not Search Console, the search breakdown data in the Google Business Profile. So in Performance Insights, you've got the search breakdown data. That's how your business is showing up on maps right now. And so a lot of the terms that come in there, people are actually searching for. So that's a really helpful place to start looking. You can see using a tool like Local Falcon, actually where you're ranking for terms like that. So if you're showing up for a certain search term, you can for that search term, which is helpful. So
yeah, I actually, that brings to mind, I recently worked with a taco chain. I was working with one franchisee who has like 6 locations in a big taco chain, and we were looking at his local SEO. It was kind of terrible. And then we dug a little deeper and found that his primary category for the restaurant was Tex-Mex. And people, like, when you're, the thing is, like, Tex-Mex is the accurate description for what that restaurant is, but it is in no way what people are looking for when they're like, Taco Tuesday, taco, Mexican restaurant is what people are looking for. Barely anybody was searching Tex-Mex. So it's like, you could perfectly encapsulate what you are. And we do this at DBA too, when we, come up with blog topics and things, or even webinar topics. And we think about them and we structure the perfectly named thing. But in reality, the best source for us for blog material is actually this Q&A section that happens during these webinars, because people ask the questions the way that a person would ask the question, and then, you know, and it's a totally different thing than how we sort of contrive them in our minds.
Yeah, and I just want to add, to go back a little bit, don't get hung up on variations as much, because the results are typically the same. So for example, if I do a search on Local Falcon in a grid, and I want to see like the proximity rankings and stuff. If I do, you know, car locksmith, auto locksmith, automotive locksmith, all those scans are going to be almost identical for you and your competitors.
Why?
Well, because Google understands that it's all the same thing. But if you do auto locksmith near me, well, now you've added an extra element, which might change. If you do auto locksmith Dallas, that's going to be completely different. But even if you do like auto locksmith service, it might slightly change, but it's pretty much going to be the same. So really, you want to look at your main services. So if you're doing, you know, if you're doing residential locksmith or commercial or automotive, and then people might say like key fob. That's complete, like, even though it's dealing with car, it's a completely different search term. So you're going to get a different rank, but little variations are not going to bring up different results, because that's how Google understands. So synonyms are great. Sometimes you could look through, you know, you do a search and you see bolded words in the Google results, and you might say, oh, Google thinks this is important, so I might want to add that. But what Sherry was saying is you want to be a little bit higher level, and of course create a page for each one of those higher level services on your website.
Yeah, and then I would also add to that, updating your content frequently as well. So whether that be with a blog or something to that effect, you know, making sure that you are putting new, fresh content, and then having any backlinks that you could potentially have, right? Working with partners. That's one of the great things when you work with other folks, if there's ways that you can connect your content, right? All that's going to help with your SEO as well.
That's really difficult for local businesses, because it's a lot of, and I'm sure you guys see the same thing, is when you're trying to get links from the local communities, like you ask your client, like, do you know any other business owners? Or are there other people that you do business with that are, you know, if you're a florist, you deliver to a lot of times to the funeral home. Do you know the owner? Can we get a link from them? And so that's, those type of relationships are super important. So we're not only dealing with, we're creating a piece of content, but now how can we leverage that into maybe try to make it a link? So I create a page that talks about funeral homes, and then you create, you know, and then on there, and then I'm linking out to different funeral homes that I'm delivering to, and then they'll refer back, you know, they'll link back to me from on their website. So that creates a lot of strength. So we're creating a piece of content that we can try to leverage for link building as well, which is very difficult for local, because it's like pulling teeth to do that kind of work, but it's really worth it.
Would you, if you had a local business, would you do it? Would you do that work? You know, is it worth it, I guess?
It's hard from like the SEO point of view to say, okay, we're going to spend 3-4 hours writing, you know, communicating and doing stuff. And then they're like, well, what did you do? Well, I did outreach for X amount of time, and did it get a link? Will it get a link? It's hard to know ahead of time if it's going to work. And so that's why I think a lot of times it's not done, because we just don't know what the result is going to be. Whereas if I create 5 new pages, I could show the owners, well, I worked, look, I did 5 new pages, right? But those 5 pages may not have done as much as if I got 2 backlinks, but I don't know if I'm going to get those backlinks.
Yeah.
And so there, it's kind of like we don't know what's going to happen. So that, I feel like that's a little bit of a headache from our point of view.
But if you, but for the owner of a business, if they could do it, let's say they had 2 businesses with separate identities, you know, referencing each other because you're in charge of both of them, that would be a worthwhile endeavor.
Oh yeah, you link to each other for sure.
Yeah.
I think so. And also too, I would say just asking, you know, if someone else is trying to link with you, you know, just being creative about it, of how you can potentially amplify and make more of that, you know, and those examples that you just gave, Jan, are perfect. You know, I think being creative in that way of how you can get those links, and looking at where your service is being offered or bought, and then how you can potentially link back. Sometimes, honestly, it's just thinking creatively. And you'd be surprised how many folks I think are open to that.
All right, we have
Especially-
we have a question about SGE. And first of all, before I ask that question, what does SGE stand for again? And what's the definition of SGE?
Search generative experience.
Experience. Search generative experience. Okay. And search generative experience is just that it is like an AI aspect in search, or how would you define what SGE is that everybody's bringing in?
I think it's kind of Google's new, I think it's going to be the future of Google. I think it's going to be how Google search is going to look.
And this is this similar to what Bing's doing? Yes? Using ChatGPT in their search. This is Google's version of that?
Not really, but sort of. It's kind of hard to describe.
Google
Yeah,
has
I'm
Bard.
lost,
Google
man.
is Bard, right? Google has Bard, but
Yeah.
they're kind of integrating Bard into the local thing, and it's everything. It's not necessarily confusing, but it's hard to know where they're going to go. I think what Sherry's saying is, as far as informational searches, it's going to be very difficult to rank things like if you're trying to chase after featured snippets for your client, like that's going to be tough because no one, like, you're going to get the full answer. And then why would someone go to your website? Even though Google is probably going to be forced to legally to, like, here's our sources where we're getting this information from, but who's going to click do that kind of thing? No one's going to.
Well, is SGE just a local thing, or is it it's the whole search engine thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here's the question from an anonymous attendee. As SGE evolves, any recommendations on the best ways to optimize toward these generative follow-up questions that Google offers users on the SERP? And I guess from you're saying with local, no.
I think it's too soon to tell, to be honest with you. So the way SGE works right now is you ask a question, and then Google will give you results. Sometimes it will give you an answer, like Jan said. And then sometimes there'll be little icons underneath with what they call like follow-up questions. Thinking, okay, instead of making the person retype in another entirely related question to get more answers, Google is almost like preemptively saying, okay, we think they might want more information, and these are the topics we think they might want more answers about this particular topic.
That, like, the people also ask, but I think it's going to be smarter because it's going to be AI driven and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That was my next question: is how is that different than what we've seen all along?
Yep.
Yeah, you can mine, people mine that people also ask, but there was like people also ask would show like questions that were like basically the same or irrelevant. Like sometimes they didn't even make sense what the questions were showing up. But so this one is probably going to be better, which will help you get content. It's like if I'm trying to rank for this, and then the other questions show a bunch of, I was like, oh, I didn't think of that angle. I'll put that into my article so that Google thinks that I'm more complete on my article or my website. I might create another article with that. So I think people have been, doing that with people also ask, but I think the quality of those questions, it's going to be a lot better. And I would definitely look at that to see if I'm missing anything on my website for ideas for content.
Yep. Yep. But I think it's going to be really hard to figure out like how to rank. And then the other thing is going to be how people are actually going to click through to your website. I think that's going to be the other challenge, I think.
Yeah. So in terms of preparing for it, I don't think anything's really going to change in that sense. We're going to be looking at entities, setting up entities, making sure that they're consistent across all your digital assets. So it's going to be building your brand presence.
What does it mean to set up entities?
So every digital asset online, so any social profile, Web 2.0, your website, your Google Business Profile, any additional pages on the website. If you've got like a .me profile about you as an owner or as a writer, someone who's contributing to articles or whatever that looks like, those kinds of entities. So being able to tie those together, and then on the website, it's going to be schema markup. I mean, that's the easiest to consume instead of the content on the website. So making sure that those things are all tied together in a proper manner.
Here's a question from a different direction. Another anonymous question. Does anybody have experience in working with 360 visualization, VR, on Google Maps? How to add it, update it, optimize it? Is this still a thing? Is this still a thing that people are doing on their local profiles?
I don't have anything new about it. I mean, it's not used very frequently. For example, I've seen good examples for like dentist office. If you have a good, a brand new building and you have a beautiful office or something and you want to show it off and you want to do a 360 showing off your place and how professional it is and clean it is, or something like that in the medical space where you want to make people comfortable, that would be a good usage of it. I have never heard of any of it being helpful for rankings at all, except for just the conversion factor,
the user experience. Like I saw one time, it was a surfaces company, like that did like marble and granite and stuff, and so they had one that kind of took you through their whole warehouse, and so you could just see, like, because that would be something that a person might do once in a lifetime. So before you go, you would see what you're in for, is in terms of a tour, was kind of helpful. But that then is very dependent on whether or not it really helps the user to get a sense of what you're trying to show there. But I can see why, having a psychology background, one of the things that they say is that people cannot do things that they cannot see themselves doing. It's very difficult. So if you think about going to the dentist, you've gone to a lot of dentists, and even if you move to a new town and you have to go to a new dentist, you can imagine from your past experience what that looks like. But when you're doing something that's new that you've never done before, it's very difficult to get people to go and do it. So the more you can visually describe what the experience will be like when they get there, the more likely they are to follow through and actually show up. So it would probably be helpful in those instances. But I haven't even seen a lot of it on local profiles lately. So I asked if it's still happening. Bobby,
in some cases.
Yes, so go ahead.
I was going to say, I think in some cases it is really helpful. I've run into cases where a pin is in the wrong place on a map, and Google hasn't gone and taken a street view in front of the building where the pin should be. And so you can't even verify that. So the address is on the back side of the building, suite number, whatever. And then, so by having that street view or being able to, hey buddy, hang on.
I know Kevin, this probably bothers you, but this will be the favorite part of the webinar. Yeah, we'll get lots of comments and questions.
This happens all the time. So they basically live in all my videos. But having that 360 view, being able to publish that, then for verification or being able to prove, hey, this is real. I'm not located right here. I'm actually over here, and your guys' street view is wrong. That's really helpful.
Let's see. Bobby has a question. How do we get more local citations? If we get a local newspaper writing about us monthly, does that count as one link or many links per month? It probably matters how that's structured, right?
So, I mean, if you get a newspaper article written about you, that would count. I think that would count as one link.
But article. If that same newspaper was writing every month, I suppose it would be multiple if it goes to different pages, or no, that's one entity, yeah. one backlink, one entity.
It's definitely going to be helpful, especially if they're on different pages. So I think people get mixed up if we take the other extreme of like a spam website, or maybe you have a link, someone giving you a link and it's in the footer of their website. It's on every single page of that website linking to you. That link's not going to count for very much, because it's not going to count 500 times because they have 500 pages with your footer link in it, right? So, but New York Times, if they create an article and then next month they reference you again in another article, that's 100% going to help you boost the link power, as well as potentially get you clients and things like that. But yeah, just because you have it from one domain doesn't mean that you only count one from the whole domain. That's not right. I think we're confusing what the spammers would do, and they were just like hundreds of links from the same website to the same place. Those are, ignored, but domains that have good strength profiles already can do different, like will have different results than if you have a really spammy website linking to you 100 times. Yeah.
So we had a question in here. How did Kevin define entities? I didn't catch the first part of what he said. I would test my knowledge because I did catch it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to let Kevin answer it again. What's an entity?
Yeah, I was referring to basically any digital asset that you have online as an entity.
Yeah, so all your listings, your website. Yeah. Okay, let's see. This one is related to what Ian was just saying. And I'm not sure why it's phrased exactly this way, but did you test if local catalogs, business forums, listings, backlinks work in the local SEO? You probably have to read that question yourself to get the nature of that one, but did you test?
Well, I'll just chime in. I think it's going to be one of those, it depends on who's linking to you, and if there's a no follow on that URL pointing to you. Like if you have a Reddit forum pointing to you, is it counting or not? Probably not, because Google's probably going to discount those ones that are user generated. But if you have a link from a really niche, if there's a plumber forum and then it's linking to your website because you really explain something well and they're talking about it and they link to you, that probably will count if Google actually finds that link. But if it's going to be very, very variable. And I'm thinking again, like you just can't go and start spamming your links on forums. Like those are not going to really count, because Google's going to read the whole page. And if there's a lot of information on the page talking about something, and then there's one of your links in there amongst a good conversation, then it might count. But if it's just a random post on Reddit, and there's nothing there, Google's going to ignore that because it's not going to be important. So the text and the context of where your link is, on what form it is, and how much power that domain has, and things like that, it's all going to be so variable. You can't know ahead of time. So what we just talked about before is, how do you find out, what's important for keywords? Well, you can also look at your competitors and find out what's important in their backlinks too, right? So you can do some searches and find, there's a lot you can do, but we can't answer that question. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts, but there's no definitive answer on that.
I'll throw in something. It can be hard to test these types of things because typically SEOs are working on a bunch of different things at once, right? And so if the needle moves, what made it move, it can be hard to isolate. But I've definitely had a few experiences where I had the opportunity to work with businesses that weren't very active with any marketing or SEO. And the real advantage there is if I do a thing and then wait and measure rankings again, I get to see for real if that activity had an impact. And I've been able to do that a few times with some local citations, like small local newspaper outlets. This is not a Yelp or a Yellow Pages or some well-known citation or business directory. This is just some local newspaper outlet. There's always the question of what caused the needle to move. Is because their name was mentioned? Is it because it's sort of a traditional citation? Or is it because there's a link on the page to the website? I mean, there are a couple of things to consider, but I have had experiences where working with a business that wasn't doing anything actively, we got one business directory listing on a local newspaper website, and a couple of weeks later, they moved 3, 4, 5 positions, a significant jump in the ranking. So it looks pretty clear in a situation like that that activity had an impact. What part of it, it can be hard to say. And similarly, working with businesses that aren't doing any other SEO activities, not changing their website, not working on anything that you might expect to move the needle. I've gone in and done some citation cleanups and added a few citations and just moved them along from, 15 messy citations to 30 clean ones. And you put some keywords in Local Falcon before you do the work, or, Local Falcon, some grid or some tracking tool, but you do some measurement before you do the work, and then you wait a bit, and then you do a measurement later, and you can often see a move in the rankings. And it certainly looks like getting directory listings and links in that context can have an impact.
All right, here's a very specific question, kind of an interesting one from Donald. Hi, I have a local home-based clock repair business that ranks well in Google Business Profiles. So kudos, because that's a service listing that says it's doing well, and that's not the question we usually get. So it's starting off really interesting. I'm thinking of creating a new website for a watch repair with the same physical address. Could this new business adversely affect my current positions? FYI, I am not in Maps, and I don't want customers showing up without an appointment. Thanks. That's a new one, huh?
Nope. It's asked all the time.
Oh, it's a new one for me. I know the service area business question that we always get.
Yeah. So generally speaking, Google really doesn't want to, and you guys can all jump in as well. Generally speaking, Google does not want a home-based business to set up two businesses out of the same address. And in a lot of cases, one or both of those listings would get suspended. So what I would do and recommend is make your current clock company a clock and watch repair company and just have one business profile. And then that would diminish your risks of getting suspended and ticking off Google. That'd be my recommendation. I don't know if Stefan or Jan has any suggestions, but that would be my recommendation.
Could still have two domains, two websites, because he's saying I'm thinking of creating a new website for watch repair. But if it's the same business,
I wouldn't even do two websites because you'd be diluting your SEO efforts and spending your time. I mean, I would just add another service to your current website, which is watch repair. I mean, because they're totally related to one another. Mm-hmm. They both have to do with timepieces.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like you can, like Sarah said, you can have unlimited amount of websites. You can rank 100 times in organic if you feel like it, but in the Google business, you only can have one. And then at that point, you're splitting your resources into different websites. You got to, maintain those. You have to, maybe there's backlinks, and then you're just creating more headaches. Put it all into one. You're already ranking well. You're probably not going to lose any rankings for what you already have. Just add another service page. Or change your homepage title tag to clock and watch repair, so you can optimize one site for both those keywords because they're related. It's actually gonna probably strengthen what you already have and be quicker to rank for watch.
Cool. I'm glad we got to that question because that could change the whole setup. And I know that's something that this advisory board talks about a lot of times, like when bigger clients want to open a new location and stuff, they come to these guys first to figure out how should I do that to best optimize SEO, and you know what I mean? And so in cases like that, definitely, reach out to somebody in local SEO, one of these guys' businesses, and just get their professional recommendation before you find yourself like down the road and how do you say, without a paddle, that thing.
It's definitely happened a lot. And I've seen it, sorry to jump in, but I've seen large businesses, you would think they would know better. And they come to you and they're like, we've opened a new location, or we've merged our websites, or we've done some huge thing. And our rankings are bad now. Can you help us fix it? And then you're like, how did someone, oh no, we didn't really, the dev did it. We didn't really ask any. Like you really have to get input. I know it costs money to talk to us on one-on-one to get the details and all that stuff. But few $100s is going to save tens of thousands of dollars down the road potentially, but depending on how many listings you have.
It's a tangled mess. And how many times have you seen where people just, my background is in, really in marketing agency. So it's like, somebody will kill a website that had a ton of authority, and then it's gone. You don't get that back. And so before you make these big moves, it is a good idea to check with the experts, and they can maybe take what you're doing and craft it a little bit so that you get the best of both worlds. Okay, here's the number one question for today, which I kind of saved because it's a little philosophical. But somebody asked, can the panel discuss any changes or how they see local SEO evolving over the next few years? What do you think we should be prepared for? Maybe I should say come back next week when we have Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato on for our philosophy of local SEO series.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what we've been talking, what Jan brought up earlier is search generative experience. I mean, artificial intelligence is going to be big in every aspect of what we do with regard to search engines. And so, and content, I guess one caution that I would have is do not use these AI tools to just write content for you and put it up on your website. Don't do that, okay? Because it's not great content right out the gate. You always have to edit. You always have to add your own content. You always have to add your own expertise, your own authority, your own tone of voice. I mean, what Chat GPT and what these AI tools put out is not your voice. It's not your content. And so they're great for coming up with good ideas for you as far as, content ideas and those types of things, but do not take what they put out as far as content and just put it up on your website. Google will not look favorably on that. And with Google's helpful content system, you could actually hurt your site by doing that. So that would be my word of caution.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I would totally second what Sherry just said, actually putting thoughtful expertise behind the content that you're developing, take your time with it. It makes you look incredibly unprofessional when you have typos on your homepage. And if you are looking at something completely from maybe an SEO standpoint, and that's it, your customers are going to read through that. And then the other thing too, that I would follow on into what we were just talking about a second ago would just be, if you are going to expand your services, well, that's actually an amazing moment. So build that up, play that up, make it sound like you're growing. Here we go, next phase, so really think through the things that your company is doing and how you can potentially make some hay out of it.
So I was going to say, if we're trying to be philosophical about this, one of the things that we know from Google telling us, and they don't really disclose a lot, but when it comes to ranking for local, they talk about 3 primary categories or factors, which are the relevance of your business to the query, the distance between your business and the searcher, and your prominence online. So those 3 factors sort of drive everything. And if you want to get philosophical about this stuff, instead of being tactical, when you're reading something that's tactical, some blog post saying, hey, do this to rank, think about how it has an impact on your relevance, your distance, or your prominence. And then so just keeping those things as sort of the underpinnings for local SEO in general, keeping those in mind going forward. I mean, there are certain factors that aren't going to change. The distance between your business and the searcher are fixed, right? That's provided that that's going to continue to be a factor in local, which certainly it is. That's what local is all about. You can't change your distance unless you start opening multiple locations. and your relevance, and how do you let Google know what you do so that Google can figure out if you're relevant to a particular query? And that goes to the idea of creating content. If you do a thing, make sure Google knows that you do a thing or that you sell a thing. And that might change right over time. If you want to let Google know that you sell a thing, maybe you need to get it into Merchant Center or whatever Google rolls out in the future, but somehow you have to let Google know that you do a service, provide a service, or sell a product so that you can be relevant to a query. But, really on a high level, those issues are going to stay the same, I think. I hate to try to make predictions. What might change is how we go about letting Google know that we're relevant, or what Google looks at online as determining what makes a business prominent. Those more tactical things are going to change. But if you think of relevance, distance, and prominence as being fundamental to the whole ranking algorithm, I think just paying attention to those things might continue to be helpful for a long time.
I just want to add a practical thing. I mean, if we're just looking at SGE, Google went from 3 to 5. So they're not trying to take away choice. They're trying to give us more choice. And if we look at why hasn't like voice search ever taken off, is because when it says, I want, give me a plumber, and the machine tells you, here's the number of a local plumber, person's like, well, how do I know if they're good? Why do you only give me one? How do I evaluate that? So then they have to go and actually go and look at reviews and things like that. So now Google's giving us 5 with more choice. So now in a real practical way, when you're in if you're in a 3-pack, just because you're 1 doesn't mean you get more clicks. People are like, well, do the pictures look nice? How many reviews do they have? What are the, is it 4.8 or is it 4.2? Even though you're 3rd on that 3-pack, if you're 4.9 and everyone's 4, you're going to get that click. Now you have 5 now you have 4 other people to compete with. So reviews and your rating, now you're competing against 2 other competitors in the 5-pack potentially, if it stays that way. So that's where I would say focus. I don't know what's going to happen a year from now, but right now that's how it is.
So it's kind of like the search engines are trying to put forth the best options. And so the answer is always going to be a best option for what somebody's looking for. And as I always say to my marketing team, I go, half of our job is to do the job. The other half of the job is to show that we did the job. And that's what the SEO part is like, you got to be a good choice, but then you got to display online in your, as Kevin taught us today, entities, and all your entities. You have to reflect what you're doing. So like Rachel said, if you have new things going on, if you have news, if you have new products, you got to be constantly updating that. And I don't know because I'm not an SEO, but I would guess that when you guys look at businesses, it's less about, sort of these tactics and more about just not really paying enough attention to representing yourself well overall. That probably needs a lift usually.
Yeah, I mean, reading the question, how do we see local SEO evolving over the next few years, and what should we prepare for? I would agree with you, Sarah. Like a lot of what I see is businesses just not presenting well, and not communicating online what they actually offer. And so Google's always pushing to provide a more personalized search. That's with the search generative experience, every response is going to become different. And so you're going to look something up and I'm going to look something up, and we're going to go down opposite paths because I might have a little bit different intent, or I might phrase a question differently. And so it might offer me a different result than you, and that result would be better for me than would be for you. And so as stated before, Google's looking at all kinds of behavioral stuff with us. We're just the guinea pigs, right? So as they're personalizing search more, I think it's going to be just more important. So what should we prepare for? Understand your users better. Understand the people that you're selling to. That's how you prepare. How are they actually going to search? How are you going to be a benefit to them? And there was a question earlier about tooling, and I didn't say it earlier, but one tool I think gets overlooked all the time is in Google AdWords. You've got, there's tons of research tools in there, but the Performance Max campaign, if you were to set up a Performance Max campaign, and you're trying to create your avatar in there. You don't have to run a campaign, but you can set it up and you can do tons of research on your ideal person, your ideal client, or the person who's going to buy from you. Like, what kind of cars do they like? What kind of, like, it doesn't matter. There's so much information in there. So that's a really useful tool that I think is underutilized for SEO.
Yeah. It's like nobody wants to write their resume. They're busy doing their jobs, you know, and hitting it out of the park in all the ways that we're supposed to be doing in our everyday jobs. And then somebody asks you, well, tell me about yourself. And that's really what all your digital properties are, is a big resume, and nobody wants to do it. You know, because it's like, how do I talk about all these things in all these ways? And but it's a very important part of getting found. If you guys who are on with us today want more guidance, there's a couple ways to do it. One is to become part of our private Facebook group, and you can pose questions there. If you pose too deep a question, we'll probably have to get into some consulting with our experts. But in general, it is a good resource to ask questions that can be answered by experts. Also, to varying degrees, the people who are on our advisory board take on clients, and they do this work, and they are worth talking to. So if you want some guidance, you know, you can reach out to me, or reach out to Luke, reach out in the Facebook group, and we'll connect you with these guys if you have projects coming up. Our next webinar, I think we're scheduled to have 2 in July, so look for that. There'll be one, I think, coming up the week after 4th of July on a Wednesday, and then our usual 3rd week of the month Thursday webinar. And you'll see our advisory board again in September when we'll do another forum like this, and they'll come on and talk about all the things that have changed for local SEO in that time. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks for the lively conversation. And we get philosophical because so many things are changing so rapidly. It's hard to imagine them being more rapid, but probably that's what we should expect, huh?
Yeah, we're in big flux right now. It's interesting for us, but it definitely makes our job harder in a certain way. It's more interesting, but harder. If you have other questions, come to the forum, because I'll be there for the next little bit, and I'll answer them right away. In the Facebook group, because there's a bunch of questions we didn't get to, but yeah.
There are a bunch of technical questions in here. Somebody asked, as a medical practice, what entities are an absolute must. That we can answer that for you in the Facebook group. Also, we do have a healthcare specific webinar that you can come to, where we talk all about healthcare stuff. We have an automotive one too, where we talk strictly automotive. And so if you didn't get your question answered today, look for the Facebook group. And also, we do use these questions to prompt blogs and things. So check out the site, and you'll see things in your email that'll point you to that. Anybody else have any parting wisdom before we go? All right. Well,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Sherry, Kevin, Stefan, Rachel,
Thanks.
Yen, and Luke.
Thank you.
Good job. This was exciting. I learned a lot and appreciate it.